The auction house was nearly empty. Dust floated in the sunbeams that cut through broken windows, and the smell of fear still hung in the air. Chairs sat half pushed back, their metal legs scraping faintly against the concrete as the last of the crowd shuffled out. Most people had left hours ago, the dogs they had bought for a price. Some left proud, others smug. But when the noise of bidding died down, only silence remained. In the farthest corner of the hall, there was one dog left. She didn't bark, she didn't whine, she didn't even lift her head when her number was called. A thin, fragile creature with patchy fur, eyes dulled by too many betrayals. She was small enough to vanish in the shadow of her cage. Dog who had stopped asking for anything. No one raised a hand. Not a single voice called out. The auctioneer cleared his throat, irritation flashing across his face. $1, he barked. His gavel hovered impatiently, ready to strike and close the book on this forgotten life. And that was when a uniformed hand rose from the back row. The man was an officer, still in his patrol blues, his badge catching the dying light. Hesitate didn't wait for another bidder. His voice rang out steady firms. I'll take her. The gavel slammed. $1. One dog. One decision that would change everything. But at that moment, no one in that dusty auction house knew what was about to unfold. Not the officer. Not the silent dog. The few stragglers who glanced at him, like he had just wasted a coin. And yet, what came next would ripple far beyond that room. When Officer Ryan James walked to the front to claim the last dog, people watched with half-amused smirks. Why would anyone waste time on her? She was sickly, worthless, destined for nothing but to disappear quietly. But Ryan's steps were deliberate, struck the floor with quiet authority as he approached the trembling cage. The auction worker opened it reluctantly, muttering, "She's nothing but trouble." Trouble. That word echoed in Ryan's mind as he crouched down. The little dog wouldn't meet his eyes. She pressed herself against the corner of the crate, shivering, her ribs showing through thin skin. Ryan didn't reach in right away. Instead, he sat on his heels, low, calm, patient. "You're not trouble," he whispered. "Not to me." Minutes passed, the room emptied further. And then, with trembling hesitation, Dog lifted her head just enough to glance at him. Her eyes, cloudy, tired, met his. For the first time in who knows how long, she seemed to notice that someone wasn't walking away. That was all it took. Ryan extended his hand slowly. She sniffed once, flinched back, inched forward again. And then, as if some small flicker of hope dared to return, she let his fingers brush against her fur. Fragile moment of trust sealed their bond. When Ryan carried her out of the auction house, she was weightless in his arms. Too weightless. Feel every bone, every fragile rib beneath her matted coat. She sagged against him, too weak to resist. In her stillness was something more, surrender, not to defeat, but to safety. Outside, the sun had already dipped low, the parking lot in orange and pink. Other buyers loaded strong, eager dogs into trucks, their laughter echoing. A few snickered when they saw the officer cradling his fragile purchase. $1 dog, someone muttered. Not even worth that. Ryan ignored them. His grip tightened slightly as he whispered again. "You're worth more than all of them." He placed her gently in the back seat of his car, laying his jacket beneath her thin body. She curled into it instantly, as if the scent of safety was enough to ease the edge of her fear. As he drove away, the auction house shrank in his mirror, disappearing like a nightmare at dawn. Ahead lay uncertainty. But for the first time in her life, the little dog wasn't alone. At home, Ryan set her down in a quiet corner of his living room. She didn't move much, just sat, eyes darting, sure of the walls around her. He filled a bowl with water, another with food, and stepped back. For minutes nothing. Then, slowly, she approached, clicking faintly against the floor. Her nose dipped to the bowl, and for the first time in hours, she began to eat. Not greedily. Not desperately. Just cautiously, as if she expected the bowl to be taken away at any second. Ryan watched from across the room, a heavy ache pressing against his chest. Kind of life had she lived that even water was something she feared to lose. That night, he sat nearby as she curled on a blanket. He spoke softly, her hear the calm in his voice. He didn't touch her, didn't push her. Trust couldn't be demanded. It had to be given. And in the quiet glow of his lamp, eyes fluttered closed, sleep found her, the first safe sleep of her life. Days passed. Slowly she began to move more. A step here. A glance there. She startled at sudden noises, flinched when hands moved too quickly. But each time Ryan waited. Each time, he showed her she had nothing to fear. It was patience that drew her out. He gave her a name, Grace. Because survival itself was her act of grace. And Grace began to change. Her coat, once dull and rough, began to shine. Her eyes, once clouded, began to sparkle with curiosity. She learned the sound of her name, the rhythm of his voice, beat of footsteps that always stopped beside her instead of walking past. For the first time, she wagged her tail. Just once. Just a small flicker. Ryan, it was everything. Yet, it wasn't only Grace who was changing. Ryan carried heavy memories too, ones he rarely spoke of. Years of patrol, of seeing the worst of humanity, had worn him down. Nights were heavy, silence was sharp. His home felt too empty, too cold. But with Grace, the silence softened, shifted. Her fragile presence filled corners that had been hollow for too long. Her recovery mirrored his own. Every small victory, every step she took toward trust, reminded him that healing was possible. That broken didn't mean finished. That even lives dismissed as worthless could carry unimaginable worth. Then came the day that proved it beyond doubt. Ryan had taken Grace on a quiet walk near a park. She trotted beside him cautiously, leash loose, ears perked at every sound. She was still timid, she was learning. As they passed a bench, Ryan noticed a man slumped forward, his body trembling. At first, he thought it was just exhaustion. Then he saw the man's lips pale, his chest heaving in shallow gasps. Ryan reacted instantly, years of training kicking in. He rushed forward, the man's pulse calling for backup. But as he worked, something unexpected happened. Grace, the timid, once forgotten dog, pulled forward, her nose pressed against the man's hand, her body leaning gently against him. Her tail wagged softly, steady, as if telling him he wasn't alone. The man's eyes fluttered open, landing on the dog at his side. And through shallow breaths he whispered, "Thank you." It wasn't clear if he meant Ryan, or both. But it didn't matter. In that moment, Grace had become more than a rescued dog. She was a rescuer too. Word spread after that day. Officer with the $1 dog wasn't a story of pity anymore. It was a story of hope. Grace became a quiet presence at the station. Her soft eyes and gentle demeanor, reminding hardened officers that compassion still mattered. Victims who came in frightened would often relax when Grace sat beside them. Her warmth breaking through the cold walls of procedure. She wasn't just healing herself anymore. She was healing others. And Ryan knew, deep down, that this was the reason he had lifted his hand at that auction. Out of impulse, not out of charity. But because Grace's story wasn't meant to end in silence. Months turned into years. Grace grew stronger, healthier, sleek, her eyes bright. The fragility that once defined her was replaced by quiet strength. But Ryan never forgot the first time he saw her. Invisible, dismissed as nothing. He told her story often. Not to boast, not to draw praise, but to remind others of a truth too easily forgotten. Value isn't measured in price. A dog sold for $1 at a forgotten auction became priceless in the lives she touched. The officer who reached for her discovered that sometimes the smallest act, a single raised hand, a single dollar spent, can rewrite an entire destiny. So if you ever wonder whether compassion matters, remember Grace. Remember the officer who didn't walk away when everyone else did. Remember that healing is not reserved for the strong, but for the broken who are given a chance. Because Grace wasn't just rescued. She became a rescuer. And it all began with $1, one choice, and one man who believed that no life is worthless.